Hello and welcome back to a series of lectures on herbal medicine. In the beginning, we talked about the historical development, where from we have discovered these herbs and what are the needs and necessities to commercialize as well as conserve them. Today, we will talk about an important plant which is available in the Northwest Himalayas and has a tremendous commercial potential, primarily because of the active principles which are used for treating the various diseases that are sometimes even destructive. The plant that we have selected today is Arnebia benthami, which is commonly known as Casaban and commercially known as Gauzaban. There is an English term for this plant also, that is known as the pan plant. This plant is available in Northwest Himalayas at an altitude of about 3000 to 4500 meters. It has adaptability to those habitats where the soil is sandy textured in nature and where the habitat remains constantly open and exposed to sunny conditions. However, because of the overexploitation, its availability in natural habitats as well as the density of each population is gradually getting reduced, which in turn necessitates not only its domestication, but also development of methods and techniques by which it can be commercialized so that whatever its potential is, that can be used for the benefit of those who can domesticate it. The discovery of this plant, once we look at the history, is oldest among the herbs that are used at present in different systems. Theoretically as well as practically, it has been demonstrated that a Chinese emperor Shen Nung has discovered this plant in the wild habitats, wherein accidentally he discovered that its root can be used for overcoming certain chest as well as cardiac ailments. He has noted its information in his text known as Pun Cao. This book is still available in Chinese libraries and describes about 3000 different plants which have been seen to be important in terms of not only their commercial value, but also overcoming various ailments. Now, this Arnebia benthami in the Northwest Himalayas has been seen to be available in those areas where the glaciers are in the vicinity and where the habitats have a sandy textured soil with a low potential of retaining moisture as well as being continuously exposed during sunny conditions. Further, if the soils remain low in nutrient content, that does not in any way affect the productive potential of these plants and helps them to survive as well as produce the progenies in every passing year. However, during the last few decades, it has been seen that the discovery of this herb as well as its potential has related it to its overexploitation, which in turn has threatened its survival in natural habitats, which has resulted in creating and developing strategies by which it can not only be domesticated, but also commercialized under ex situ conditions, that is at low altitudes, which actually are not its basic habitat. Now, over the past 10 years, it has been seen that the areas where it was available and the areas where we try to domesticate it have shown only one difference, and that is the difference of soil texture as well as the severity of winter conditions. Yet, these variations do not in any way affect the productive potential as well as the survival of this plant. In general, in natural habitats as well as under ex situ conditions, two basic methods of its propagation as well as commercialization can be used. One is the method of sexual reproduction, that is, wherein we try to use the seeds as a propagule, and that seed in turn can help us to raise a progeny which can be not only conserved but also used for commercial production of the product. Second important method is wherein we use vegetative means of propagation, that is, wherein the underground portions, that is, the rhizome, can be used for multiplication, conservation as well as commercialization. In both the cases, that is, wherein we use sexual means of reproduction or where we use vegetative means of propagation, one has to take care of the stage at which we can start this propagation and the basic requirements that are to be fulfilled prior to domestication as well as commercialization. First, let us talk about seeds. Now, usually in natural habitats, these seeds are shut down in autumn and they are able to survive even during extreme winters at temperatures of around -20 to -25 degrees Celsius. However, under XC2 conditions, the temperature only drops to about -5 degrees Celsius. So, that in turn necessitates to subject these seeds to the cold treatment wherein for about 10 to 15 days, we have to keep these seeds in the refrigeration so that their treatment, natural treatment is actually substituted by artificial cold treatment, and then we try to sow them. Now, in general, these seeds can be sown in soils wherein about 50% of the sand has been added, and these seeds ought to be dropped on the surface and thinly covered with either ashes or sometimes even sand, or sometimes if necessary with the dried foliage of the grasses. After sowing for about a week, no irrigation is to be provided so that these seeds are able to first adapt to the conditions in which we have sowed them. After that, we usually try to irrigate superficially, that is adding only a limited quantity of water on the surface of the bed in which the seeds have been sown to facilitate the absorption, which in turn will facilitate the germination of the seeds, giving rise to healthy seedlings. During the developmental phase of these seedlings, there is no need to add any chemical or any organic fertilizer because that has been seen to negatively affect the developmental pattern of the seedlings. After these seedlings attain a height of about 10 to 12 inches, they are transplanted into various beds where the distance between the seedlings as well as distance between the rows of the seedlings is to be regularized so that their growth does not in any way affect the productive potential as well as the quality of the product, that is the rhizomatous portion that we actually use commercially. After transplantation, each seedling is to be monitored for about 15 to 20 days to see whether it is able to adapt as well as survive to give rise to a healthy plant. Generally, after transplantation, each seedling can attain a productive status in about 2 to 3 years, wherein the rhizome attains the size of about 20 to 25 centimeters in length, and each rhizomatous portion can sometimes be about 5 to 10 centimeters in diameter. This rhizome in turn can be harvested and then used for extracting whatever active principles are lying in, and those active principles in turn can be used for the manufacture of the drugs for which this plant is commercially useful. However, if the harvesting is carried out in a manner wherein no part of that rhizome is allowed to remain in the habitats, the chances are that this conservation and commercialization technique can in turn affect the survival pattern of the plant. In the second strategy, that is where we use the vegetative means of propagation, the rhizomatous portion of these plants is harvested usually in the spring months, that is from March to about May, and in this period each rhizomatous portion after being dug out is first washed with water so that one can locate where the buds, that is the shoot apex of the rhizomatous portion is lying, and each of these buds is then isolated and then resown in the segmented form in its natural habitat. However, care is to be taken that once we try to split the rhizome into different segments, each segment should have at least a small portion of this apical meristem so that will facilitate the development of a new healthy plant. Usually, this rhizomatous portion takes about 15 to 20 days to give rise to a healthy plantlet, which in turn is in need of transplantation to a main field wherein it is allowed to remain continuously exposed to sunny conditions and where, if and when the need arises, proper irrigation is carried out. Here, one must emphasize the excessive irrigation primarily because the underground portion in the vegetatively propagated plants is much bigger than the underground portion of those wherein we use seeds as a means of propagation. Now, in the vegetative propagation, usually only about a year is necessary to wait till the rhizomatous portion attains a productive stage. And during this developmental phase, one has to monitor what the vegetative development, that is, the development of the foliage, is actually taking place above ground. Generally, the vegetative phase, the development of leaves, the density of the leaves, size of the leaves, green color of the leaves, in turn depicts the quality as well as the quantity of the rhizome that has developed. Any signs of damage that is reflected by the seeds or any smaller this leaf development as well as lesser density of the leaf in turn reflects that the rhizome is not attaining the stage of harvesting. Generally, once the foliage reflects the maturity of the rhizome, one has to wait till the months of September, October, wherein one can see first signs of senescence, that is the change in color in the foliage from green to paleness, reflecting that it has attained the stage of maturity. At this stage, one has to dig out the rhizome, wash them and then try to dry them, but under shady conditions, because it has been seen that if these rhizomatous portions are dried under sunny conditions, whatever active principle they contain, its quantity as well as its quality gets highly reduced. After harvesting, it has been seen that the rhizomatous portions take about 30 to 45 days to attain complete dryness, so that these can either be stored for longer durations or, if the need arises, for immediate extraction of the active principles from the rhizomes, so that they can be used for the manufacture of whatever drugs the plant is used for. Now, in general, there are two ways of trying to extract the active principles from the rhizomatous portions, and therein one must use standard methods as well as techniques, so that the quality as well as the concentration of the active principle does not in any way get altered. In general, there are four basic components that have been discovered in the rhizomatous portions of the Arnebia benthami. These are: number one, arnebinol, that is an important alkaloid which has been seen to be found in a concentration of 3.5 to 5% per dry weight of the rhizomatous portion, and is considered to be the major active principle of the rhizome. Second is arnebinol, again which shows a variable concentration which has been seen to vary from 2.5% to 3.5%, and this variability has been seen to be directly related to the habitat conditions as well as the areas in which the cultivation is carried out. These two are considered to be the major components or major active principles in the rhizomatous portions of the Arnebia benthami. The other two active principles are arnebine 1 and arnebine 3. These are two minor alkaloid components which show a concentration of 0.7 to only 1.5%, but despite their low concentration, their medicinal value is as good as it is in arnebinol as arnebinol. Now, these alkaloids after extraction can either be stored for prolonged durations, or if the need arises, they can be stored for shorter duration and can be used directly for the manufacture of the medicine of which they form a component. Now, in general, the alkaloids extracted from the roots have been seen to reveal multiple properties. Among these, the most important property is their activity of acting as anti-cancer drugs. Now, this is a very recent discovery wherein it has been seen that if the alkaloids after extraction are used as a direct remedy for cancerous growths in any part, whether it is external or internal of the human bodies, the activity is so rapid and so fast that the healing can take place within a span of 3 to 6 months. Now, this discovery has necessitated that this particular active principle, that is arnabinol and arnabinone, can be labeled as official in different pharmacopoeias, among which Indian as well as the British pharmacopoeia are the major ones. In addition to this anti-cancer properties, some other activities have been described, wherein the root portion or the rhizomatous portion has been seen to be important and source of an antibacterial component, wherein the arnabine 1 and arnabine 3 have been seen as the major alkaloid components which act as antibacterial materials. In addition to this antibacterial property, one more property that has been discovered is antifungal, that automatically reflects that we can use it not only for overcoming major ailments, but also use this as a protective medicine for bacteria as well as the fungal diseases. Nowadays, another property has been discovered, especially in Unani and Ayurvedic systems of medicine, wherein they use the rhizomatous portion directly to overcome the diuretic problems that one may be suffering from. Usually, those people who are facing the urinary tract infections, malfunctioning of the kidneys, or suffer from the accumulation of the urinary components in the urinary bladder or sometimes even in the kidneys, it has been seen that if the rhizomatous portion is directly used for consumption purposes, it can act as an important diuretic component. However, in this case, care is to be taken that the quantity as well as the pattern of consumption is regularized so that it is never overconsumed or it is not consumed in a manner in which it is not recommended. One more important discovery that has been made in the Unani and Ayurvedic systems about this plant is its cardiac stimulant activity. It has been seen that those patients wherein the heart does not function properly during proper day work or during running or during traveling, it has been seen that consumption of the extract of rhizomatous portion can actually act as an cardiac stimulant, so that this in turn can facilitate the proper functioning of the heart as well as proper functioning of those that consume the extract of the rhizomatous portion. In addition, another recent discovery that has been made in especially Unani system of medicine is the extract's property of acting as a febrifuge, that is, wherein it can overcome whatever fabric problems the digestive system of the humans is suffering from. Now, these properties have been labeled as official in different systems of medicine, and obviously in turn have overexploited the sources so that these types of drugs can be used for the manufacture for the overcoming ailments that one is suffering from. In the recent years in India, especially in the Ayurvedic system of medicine, 3 more important discoveries about this plant have been made. But these discoveries are regarding the use of the flowers of this plant. Ordinarily, flower has not been used as a medicine, but nowadays in Ayurvedic system of medicine, the flowers are also used for overcoming certain ailments, among which the most important is that the flower extract, that is, once we harvest the flowers and try to boil them in water, and that extract in turn has been seen to overcome the fevers that one may be suffering from. And this is labeled as one of the major discoveries made in the Ayurvedic system of medicine regarding the herbal wealth that is available in India. Second important discovery made in Ayurvedic system is that sometimes during hot summer months or during extreme cold conditions, humans have been seen to suffer from throat and chest infections. In that case again, the extract of the flowers has been seen to be a major remedy for throat as well as chest infection. However, in this case, the extract is to be used once it is slightly hotter, because consumption of cold extract or prolonged stored extract has been seen to negatively affect the chest as well as the throat, for which it has been used as a remedy. One more discovery that has been made by Ayurvedic systems of medicine is that extract of the flowers can also be used for overcoming the heart ailments. That in turn means that in addition to official Indian and British pharmacopoeia's information about its anti-cancer as well as antibacterial, antifungal properties, this can be used for fever, heart ailments, tongue as well as the chest infections, revealing thereby that the plant that is available in the natural habitats has a property which in turn can be used for overcoming whatever remedial measures one is in need of. Now, this overexploitation, this commercialization, this use at a scale at which the nature cannot produce it has in turn necessitated to assess what methods can be useful in conserving the plant and assessing its availability in the natural habitats. According to IUCN data, that is International Union of Conservation of Nature's data, this plant is among the plants which have been critically endangered. That is, if proper care is not taken, chances are that within a span of 10 years, this plant may become extinct, that is, it will be lost forever. Therefore, necessitating that one must assess what the remedial measures for this plant are, what the methods one can use for its commercialization as well as conservation, and what education should be given to those people who are trying to overexploit or destroy the habitats of this plant. Now, once we look at Northwest Himalayas, that is one of the biodiversity hotspots of the world, and assess the habitats, it has been seen that not only the destruction of the habitats, but also the global issues of the global warming, destruction of the glaciers, or creation of the domestication habitats in the forests has in turn been one of the major causes of destruction not only of the habitat of the plant, but also affecting its survival. In Kashmir, its distribution pattern during the last 10 years has been seen to be drastically affected, primarily because of the changes that have been seen in the climatic conditions as well as the destruction of the forests that are being carried out. Now, at present, if we assess the status of this plant, this is labeled as the second important plant which have been assessed by the CIMAP, that is Central Institute of Medicinal and Aromatic Plants, situated in Lucknow in India, and which rated among the prioritized medicinal plants, among which this is the most important one, and which includes a list of 59 plants in India. Now, on that basis, methods have been developed, strategies are being planned, yet the fundamental problem about this plant under ex situ condition is that any variation, that is any change in the habitat, whether we expose it to extremely shady conditions or we expose it to extremely wet conditions, has been seen to immediately affect not only the survival pattern, but also affect the productive quality as well as the quality of the product that is used for the extraction as well as the development of the drugs or the medicine. Now, in general, the variability is as under. As I discussed earlier, in the natural habitats, arnabinol has been seen to be 3.5 to about 5% in natural habitats. But if these natural habitat conditions get altered, there the concentration of arnabinol has been seen to drop down to only 1.5%. That means almost getting reduced by about 70%. Similarly, the concentration of arnabine and arnabine 1 and arnabine 3 has been to get reduced from 1.5% to only about 0.2%. That in turn again reflects that any change in the habitat conditions, any change in the areas in which we try to domesticate it can drastically affect the productive potential as well as the quality of the product that is manufactured from the main plant or the parts of this plant. Now, that in turn means that even though commercialization can be carried out, domestication can be carried out, one must bear it in mind that the product that one wants to manufacture, the plant that one wants to use for its manufacture should be at par with what is available in the natural habitats. For this, CIMAP has actually given the following guidelines, that the cultivation of the Arnibia benthami requires a well-drained gritty soil and a sunny position in the rocky garden or on a dry wall. This statement has been quoted by CIMAP so that whosoever wants to domesticate these plants, whosoever wants to commercialize the cultivation of these plants, they must first bear these two conditions in mind so that the productivity, the quality as well as adaptability of the plant does not in any way get affected. And on this basis, the cultivation as well as commercialization of this plant has been taken up at two different institutions in India. One is at CIMAP, that is Central Institute of Medicinal Aromatic Plants in Lucknow, and second is at CDRI, Central Drug Research Institute, that is again situated in Lucknow, wherein they try to not only domesticate it, but try to analyze what changes in the active principle concentration are seen due to the variabilities in its habitat as well as in the conditions to which it is being adapted. In Kashmir, in the Department of Botany, University of Kashmir, as well as in the Sher-e-Kashmir University of Agricultural Sciences, we have tried to domesticate it, but the quantity as well as the quality of the active principle is only possible to be maintained if we are actually able to maintain the habitats regularly to a condition in which it is available in the natural areas or in the natural habitats of the plants. On this basis, those who want to domesticate this plant, who want to commercialize this plant, must try to contact or try to see what guidelines, what methods have been developed so that these guidelines are regularly followed, these methods are regularly followed, which in turn will help not only in domestication, but also in commercialization of this plant at a stage or at a level so that it can be used for not only conservation, but also for trading it to the drug industries. I hope those of you who are interested will follow these guidelines and try to not only domesticate these plants, but also try to commercialize this so that this commercialization will help them to earn something for their own benefits. Thank you.